So let me tell you why I reposted that video with just some editing. What I edited was the fact that I kept calling it contaminated water that was sent down into Sulphur Run, raising that creek a foot for 2 hours. Tens of thousands of gallons of water, I presume, was sent down that creek. And a few times I said they were sending contaminated water down. Now, I can't say for sure that it was contaminated, but I contend that it was, no matter how they spin it. And I'll tell you why. The EPA just released an answer to that video, and they said the pumps kicked on at the wetlands and there was no contamination in Sulphur Run that night. That was not contaminated water. Those assholes don't know whether it's contaminated or not. And I'll tell you why. There's only two places that could have come from. Either the big holding tanks, the 6 they have, or the big Shamu tanks. That's one option. Or they would have come from the bodies of water right next to the crash site, which I've always maintained are most likely contaminated. The EPA keeps finding contamination. Oh, they just dug up another road where they didn't assume contamination was, much further away from the crash site than these bodies of water are. They put a pipe that will pump out water from the little body of water in the lake and the wetlands. The railroad has those pumps up there that will pump the water out if it gets too high or whatever it may be, or whatever they think, whatever they decide to do on a whim that day. Because they follow no rules. They make the rules here. We have Mark Durno telling us just a few days ago that there is no to very little testing that has been done on the wetlands or the lake, even though we have pictures early on of contamination in that body of water. What appears to be contamination. How do we know if it's contaminated or not? We don't know, because they've done no to very little testing of the body of water that surrounds the crash site. What inept fools. No, they're probably not inept. They probably don't want to test it because they know what they'll find. Isn't that one of the first things you would test? The body of water, the wetlands that surround the northern perimeter of the crash site. People that watch this video don't understand probably what close proximity the wetlands are to this crash site. This isn't some massive area. That it sits right next to where these trains this happened. The largest chemical spill ever in the United States history from a derailment, and they don't test the water right there. Again, we have Mark Durno from the EPA saying that they have no to very little testing of the water. So I don't give a damn whether they're sending it down from holding tanks or they're sending it down from the wetlands. I'm contending that it's all contaminated. And until they do further testing, prove me wrong, or let us in there and do our own testing behind your veil of secrecy, behind the guarded gates and your stupid security people. Why can't we just go in there and test the damn lake? Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong that it's not contaminated water in the wetlands and in the body of water that you're sending down. When I asked him in May in the EPA meeting whether they tested or not, you can hear his I don't know if they did we test. I really don't know. I'll get back to you on that. I'll circle back. I'll check back with you.
Right.
Hi. Can you tell us a little bit about the burn pit? You said you did pull up some dirt, and is this just a rumor, or was it covered, or was it? Tell us about the burn pit, if you would.
So, was it covered? I don't know the answer to that. I don't have an answer for you on the actual pit itself. I'd have to check with our guys who were here that night. So I don't know the answer to that.
And what was the criteria for why would you repair the tracks and leave the burn pit sit?
So again,
what was the criteria for the order for doing that?
Yeah, we knew there was a contamination problem along the entire length of track, right? I mean, so there was going to be a remediation regardless of what happened next.
You said you dug up some of the burn pit?
So we are in that, the excavation is happening right now, yes.
And you said there were contaminants found?
There's contaminants found along the entire stretch. From the west side, we had a number of non-hazardous cars, plus the butyl acrylate car release, right? Those releases happen there. As we got further east, you got closer to the vinyl chloride problem, right? And as we've been digging down into that area, we are seeing some elevated contamination. So if the
What? Of
vinyl
what?
chloride.
Vinyl chloride.
Mhm.
Someone talked about a depression or a swale next to the nothing.
There's a ditch.
Okay.
Yeah, the ditch is being dug out as well.
Was there a concern with that the vinyl chloride may have?
Well, we're seeing it in the rivers downstream, so of course it got into the ditch. So it got in the ditch, got into Sulphur Run, got into Lesser Run. So yes, the answer is yes.
And State Line Lake right there? Is it anything?
Yeah, so State Line, I know there was some surface water sampling done there, and again, I don't have the information for you right now, so I'd have to
No sediment sample of State Line Lake?
I'd have to check.
And what are the chances of it having gotten under any of the industrial buildings there?
That's the next stage. So good question. Very good question. But yes, obviously we want to, part of the plans that are being not distributed, developed and reviewed is a full assessment of those areas.
Those buildings are near where the vinyl chloride spilled?
Again,
any
there are buildings near the spill areas. Yes, I'm trying to understand that we are going to.
Does everybody else understand my question?
We are
Yes.
going to establish a full characterization assessment of those areas.
All right, last question. Let's say you determine there is vinyl chloride under the buildings.
Mhm.
What's the solution?
Depends on the nature of contamination. For example, some buildings there are air stripping techniques can take place. We've done removal actions in the past where the buildings have actually come down. It just depends on the nature of the contamination and decisions that are made based on all the parties that are involved. So.
Oh, I lied. One more question. How do you determine how do you determine what volume of vinyl chloride may have gone under the buildings? How's that done?
Well, again, it's all based on environmental sampling. That's the first step. So once we see the concentrations in soil, then we can make some reasonable estimates of what might be present. So again, those assessments will answer a lot of those questions. So
it's just ridiculous. I would like to call them inept, but they know exactly what they're doing. They're omitting certain areas. Of course, anybody besides the EPA, anybody with a 10th grade education would know to test that entire site there. Lastly, we have somebody posting on the site, well, hey, let's hold judgment until we get Rick's testing back from Sulphur Run. Well, you can see the chemicals coming out of the bank. That's been there forever, and you can see it going into my bottle and where I took the soil sample today. So we know it's contaminated. And that post alone sums up the ridiculousness of this clown shit show going on here. You're going to wait for a fucking resident to test to determine whether that water was contaminated that came down. That says it all. This is a shit show. It shouldn't depend on some resident to do testing here. It should depend on the agency that's here to protect us. And obviously, they're protecting one entity, and that would be Norfolk Southern.